It was an absolutely gorgeous night. The stars twinkled like diamonds in the indigo velvet in which they were embedded. The moon was large and bright, casting silvery swaths across the waters and over the faces of the Viking people gathered on the shore to send the soul of their king home to Valhalla. All across the sands, women wept and cried out and tore their hair and spoke the name of their fallen lord in tones of reverence and inconsolable grief. And the men stood tall, silent, faces so unnaturally still it could only be a mask of stone to hide a tumult of emotion within. Looking back into the room behind him, Matthias saw the new king and Prince Ragnar making the final preparations before following their father's body to the boat that would carry it across the sea and release his father's soul to the heavens. "Are you ready?" Matthias asked. "I am," said the new king. But Ragnar didn't answer, and Matthias wondered how much of what was happening he really understood. But he did not voice this as he followed the king to the place where King Arn lay on a beautifully decorated carrying rack. King Arn looked resplendent. He was dressed in his royal robes of blue and violet, with a golden belt and a golden crown. His hands were crossed over his chest, and he held his scepter in one hand and his sword in the other. His hair was clean and brushed, his beard trimmed. He looked so handsome, almost asleep. With a nod from Matthias, the specially chosen guards carefully picked up the wooden handles and began to carry the king out of the castle for the final time. As soon as the king's body was seen arriving, everyone lit a candle and held it high. Immediately, the lament of the king began. The lament was to be performed from that moment until the last moment by one voice, the one deemed most beautiful in the nation. She stood now and allowed her voice to flow. To the sound of the lament they came, Dane with his head held high, Matthias beside him, just in case, Ragnar fidgeting on the other side of Matthias. The closer they came to the boat in which the carrying raft would be placed, the louder grew the weeping, the more tense grew the body of the new king walking beside. Matthias began to worry that it would prove too much for the young king, that his composure would give way. Gently, the soldiers laid the body of the king in the nook created for it inside the boat and took their leave. Lord Eric was the first to speak. He walked over to the boat with the Lady Dora, dressed beautifully in white, on his arm. The lady's eyes swept lovingly over the new king as she passed him on her way to the boat with her father. The new king looked at her for a long moment, love filling his eyes as well. He tried to smile, but the effort was breaking his control, so he soon reset his face as he looked quickly away from her. Tender as her years were, the Lady Dora completely understood. Matthias saw that in her eyes. At last, the speeches were over, and it was time to send the soul of King Arn on its way to Valhalla. Matthias motioned for several soldiers to come forth. "No," said the new king. "I alone will send my father home." Matthias's eyes looked with concern at the new king, because he knew it would take the strength of several men to move the boat out. "Ready the torch, Matthias," was all the new king said. The new king looked down at the still face of his father, at the breeze rustling his hair once more, and then took a stance at the prow of the boat and began to push. The boat did not move. He pushed more strongly. Still, the boat did not move. Deathly silence accompanied the new king's efforts. Nothing but the lament was heard, the notes swelling in intensity as if in empathy with the new king's effort, several soldiers approached quietly, silently, to aid the young king, but that only appeared to infuriate him. "I will do this alone," he yelled, ripping through his shirt and tearing it away as if it were that which was hampering him. He grasped hold of the boat once more, fierce determination in his eyes. "Father, I send you on that journey for which you longed for so very long." And then Matthias saw it, the amber glow from his left shoulder, and the boat began to move. The lament soared into the skies as many voices joined in, watching the son move his father's bier alone into the waters that would carry him home, forward until the boat was floating freely in the waters. There was fierce pride in Matthias's eyes as he handed the flaming torch to the new king. Perspiration was flowing freely over the king's face as he touched the flame to the heavily doused boat and watched the flames instantly ignite. They cast a warm glow over his father's face as Dane took his last look at it, as he watched the flames begin to consume his father's clothes, singe his hair. "I know you will find her, Father," Dane said, as he gave the boat one last mighty push into the waves and threw the torch into the sea, and all gasped in awe at the sight of a great blazing ball rising into the sky. All understood the greatness that they had just witnessed flying to the gates of Valhalla. King Arn and Father Odin were together now. The new king watched until even the speck of flaming boat disappeared, and then he turned back to the land, back to the people, and the lament ceased, heralding the understanding that the old king was gone now. The new king stood before them, and every knee bent to the new king. "All hail King Dane," Matthias cried.